called security to not let you in.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate you being here. My name's Catherine Dodge, and I'm your presiding officer this evening. And I'm going to start. I have a lot of paperwork, so excuse me if I get a little confused here. I'm going to start with a safety announcement so that we all know how to get out of this room in case we need to. We don't expect to need to, but we'll be ready if we do. So we have the double doors that many of us came in through. So if you just go straight out there, that's a good way to exit. We have this little single door over here on my right, your left, behind the column. Pardon me? So if you go straight out that door and then go to your right, you'll go out to the parking lot. And if you go out this door over here, also behind the column, go straight out to your left, we'll be in the parking lot, and then we'll figure things out from there should we need to do that. So that takes us to approval of the agenda, and I would look for a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, yes. We need a roll call, please.
That's not on my little, thank you. A roll call is a great idea. Please call the roll.
I'd like to note for the record that Mr. Roberts is excused and Ms. Major is running a little late. Mr. Lojeski.
Here.
Mr. Quist.
Here.
Mr. Tacky.
Here.
Mr. Cooper.
Here.
Mr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Lawrence.
Here.
Ms. Dodge.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the gentle reminder. So that takes us to approval of the agenda, and I'd look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Tacky. Is there any objection to approve the agenda?
Yep, and I move...
Yes, Mr. Lojeski.
Sorry. Thank you. I move to amend the motion by striking 4B from the agenda.
Okay, so Mr. Lojeski has moved to strike 4B on the agenda. Don't know if we need a second for that or not. Is there a second to striking 4B, the executive session, from the agenda?
Second.
Mr. Quist seconds. So discussion, Mr. Lojeski. Would you like to?
I echo the concerns of the editor of the News Miner. He sent us a couple of different emails suggesting that we could inadvertently discuss things that should be discussed in the public realm in executive session. And also from a personal note, I really don't want to see any direction given to the borough attorney tonight, and that could be done under B, but not under A. So if you guys feel the same, I hope you'll vote to remove 4B from the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dolan, do you wish to speak to that at all?
I'll just let the body know that I did have email correspondence with Mr. Boyce last Friday that I forwarded to you, and then I did speak to an attorney for the News Miner earlier this week, and I don't think we fundamentally disagree at all on the purpose of the executive session. It would require a really specific motion for specific circumstances, so unless those circumstances are to arise, I don't anticipate the need for executive session. However, I will say we always notice it as possible because we don't ever guarantee we're going to go into executive session. It would already take a motion of the body in order for us to convene an executive session.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Cooper.
I guess I have a question for Ms. Dolan, because I thought I read this in one of your communications or somebody's communication, that even if executive session wasn't on the agenda, it still wouldn't preclude the body from moving to go into executive session. Is that right?
That's correct. There's nothing in state law that requires us to put it on the agenda. I always advise the clerk's office to do it if we know that it's a possibility, just so that we're transparent with the public that it may be possible that that subject matter will include some specific privilege discussion that we wouldn't open to the public.
And a second follow-on question, if I may. And that's just to clarify that this body can't give you direction in executive session, right? If we gave you specific direction, we'd have to take a vote in public session.
There are some directions that you can give in executive session to an attorney. For instance, if there was litigation strategy or settlement direction, that would be appropriate for executive session. However, if, for instance, you were going to make a motion to file a challenge or direct me to file litigation, that motion itself would have to be in public.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion in front of us, which is to remove item B, executive session? Seeing none, clerk, looks like we're ready to vote.
Mr. Quist.
No.
Mr. Lojeski.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Tacky?
No.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Lawrence?
No.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none,
2-5.
it fails 2-5. So we're back to the motion to approve the agenda. Sounds like maybe we need a vote on the agenda. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Lojeski?
No.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Mr. Tacky?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none,
6-1.
the agenda is approved 6-1. And that takes us to citizens' comments. And I was going to read a few things before we move on to citizens' comments, since we've had lots of information out in the public of varying types. So I just wanted to read a press release that kind of talks about why we're here this evening and what we anticipate discussing. In case there is a copy, the clerks were leaving a copy out front if you want to read it. But the Fairbanks North Star Borough scheduled this meeting this evening to receive a briefing and to discuss the implementation of Propositions 3 and 4, which are known respectively as the Tax Revenue Cap and the Home Heating Reclamation Act. According to the Borough Clerk, the unofficial results indicate both measures were successfully passed by the voters. Communications to the Assembly reflect that the community's concerned this meeting was called to consider overturning the will of the voters. However, the borough attorney indicated in an email last Friday that no elected official has requested that a challenge be brought to either ballot. The borough appreciates the public's understandable concerns with the meeting notice. The intention in setting the meeting, my intention in setting the meeting, was to fully inform the Assembly of all the issues surrounding these items, which the body can only do in a properly noticed public meeting. It is anticipated the Assembly will receive an overview of the certification process for the initiatives, as well as implications to the borough. This includes upcoming decisions the Assembly will need to make with respect to implementing the Home Heating Reclamation Act, as well as the initiative ordinance restricting the borough's ability to continue enforcing air quality regulations. We might rewrite that next time. In accordance with state law, the Assembly only convenes an executive session, that is, a closed-door discussion, in very limited circumstances. While the possibility has been reserved on the agenda, it will only occur if there is litigation under discussion, including if that is brought by a third party. To date, the borough has not received any indication that it is likely to occur. So, before we go into citizens' comments, I want to just remind all of us in the room that the most important part of citizens' comments, the goal is for the Assembly to listen and understand what citizens have to say. And the role of the Assembly is to listen and to not debate. They can ask clarifying questions to ensure that they understand what the meaning, what a citizen means, so they can clarify their understanding. And the citizens can't ask questions. The only thing that can happen is if there's a technical thing, like there could be a technical question about executive sessions. I, as the presiding officer, can ask a member of administration to answer a technical question. So that is something that we can do. Because it's a special meeting, we have slightly different rules regards time. I've certainly felt that it was appropriate to have 3 minutes this evening. I'm not going to allow our 1-minute bite at the apple afterwards, because we have a meeting that starts at 7, and then we're going to resume this after that meeting. And so I want everyone to have the best opportunity to A, give their comments, and B, hear what our attorney has to say. And just one last thing is that I request, all of us are respectful, and that includes just listening and we don't prefer that we don't clap or laugh or anything else. We just want to listen to what each other have to say and consider that. So with that, I have a little more information for you. So I have a sign-up sheet, and I have 6 people on the sign-up sheet. So we're going to start by going through those 6 people. I'm going to call you forward. I'm going to ask you to sit down. We'll have 2 people at the table at all times so that we can hear as many people as possible, expeditiously or efficiently, as it were. I'm going to ask you to come up, give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood, and then you'll have 3 minutes. And once we're done with this 6 people, if there are more people that want to speak, it'll be first come, first serve. As there's an empty seat, I'll ask if someone wants to come forward. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Okay. First up, I have Carrie Mullis and Lynette Clark. Ms. Mullis, please give us your name, spell your last name, and give us your neighborhood.
Carrie Mullis, Mullis, and I'm near the Muskox. So basically, y'all are wondering why we have the concerns that we have, or maybe you've received all my emails about the concerns. But I'm just going to play this little clip real quick, and then you can maybe understand.
Sell to our delegation at this point. Thanks. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Lawrence?
I don't think what we just got was a very clear message at all. We had 25% of the people vote. Of that 25%, 55% didn't, voted down the bond issue, and 45% voted for it, and 75% of the people didn't vote at all. I know that when this administration suggested that we close one swimming pool, we had this room full pretty much all summer, it seemed like, saying, no, you can't do that. So, no, I don't think the message from this community is at all clear as to what the heck they want. So, I'm going to be looking with interest at the future assembly meetings when the consequences of us not having any money to maintain, or not having enough money to maintain facilities, and this assembly has to start considering closing facilities.
The basic gist of that was, well, we don't think, since 75% didn't vote, that this is a valid vote. That was the starting point of my worry that this is troubling. This is troubling to me because we voted. It was a democratic voting process. There were no hanging chads that I know of. And to say that we're going to do this is why the trust with Fairbanks North Star Borough and the Assembly has appeared for over a couple of years now to be disintegrating, and this is why. This is why. You don't listen. When we talk, you debate us and say, are you aware? We are aware. That's why we're here. And so I'm just saying again, this is why this distrust, why this group is behind us here, is because we don't trust who we elected anymore. It's sad.
Thank you, Ms. Mullis. Let's see if there are any questions for you. Please let the record reflect that Ms. Major is here.
So noted.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, a question?
Ms. Mullis, are you aware that that statement was made by me in response to Mr. Roberts saying that the people made a clear choice?
That's correct.
Okay,
And
so I'm going to...
I'm just, that wasn't
So you have a question about her?
No, I just asked
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Because that wasn't in the record.
So the reason I interrupted is because, as I noted earlier, we don't debate our citizens that are commenting. Any other question? Seeing none?
A question?
Yes, Mr. Lejeski.
So I just asked a question kind of logically. If the ballot initiatives were conceptually invalidated because 75% of the people didn't vote, what would that mean for the new mayor and the new assembly members and everyone else?
Right. That was my concern. It was like, well, since there wasn't this majority, this huge outturn, And I think there was a very large outturn. Last year, 2017, there was about 18,000 that voted, and this year, depending on if you look at the propositions or the mayors or whatever, there was about 14,000, over 14,000 that voted for the bond, so I thought it was a fairly good turnout. But the word was, we didn't hear clearly at all from the people because we didn't get 75% of the people voting. That's what was said.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Mullis. And next up, I have Mr. Blake Burley. Ms. Clark, welcome. Please give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Lynette Clark, C-L-A-R-K. I live in Fox.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed that Mr. Roberts wasn't here because I want to give him a big thank you for the heads up that he gave the borough voters. I quit paying attention ever since Mr. Castle got elected, so I stayed home. But the thank you is that we appreciate not only the heads up, but the voters of this voters who voted on Prop 1 and Prop 2 and voted no have made sure that a millstone, if you know what that archaic term is, that weight is not on our shoulders or hanging from our necks of debt in a time that we cannot afford to have debt. To Mayor Castle and this assembly, especially to the outgoing members, including, pardon me, our lame duck mayor, that you better be careful of the actions that the attorney is proposing, and that is how to backdoor into Prop 3 and Prop 4. To me, it is an obvious political end run of trying to negate the sacredness of our individual vote and our right to be sure it is heard and that this kind of action doesn't happen. The rumors were that immediately it was going to be negated. It's going to get rid of our vote. Figure a way to get rid of our vote. If this is what is being attempted, I can guarantee you there will be a backlash of huge proportions to this and the new government coming in as of being this last election. As an outgoing mayor, Mr. Castle, this meeting should not have been called. You're listening to a borough attorney that's collecting funds for payment for his time and services from the property owners of this borough. And through various things that he has written and submitted of his opinion of going after what you're going after tonight is absolutely smacks of collusion between you and the borough attorney. I think that this belongs on Bryce Ward's plate. He is the incoming mayor. And the headaches that you're looking to deal with yourself are going to be his headaches. And I think you should step back on this. And I think this assembly should in no way consider passing anything that the mayor and the borough attorney are handing out. That tax cap has been on the books. It was an initiative initially, hard work. I worked on it myself from the very beginning. It has been on the books for 30 years. It works. Something in government that works, and you want to destroy that. I demand, as representing me in this borough, that you not be allowed to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. And I want to be clear, the mayor did not call this meeting. I did at the request.
Oh, you're the one.
I am. I did. Because it seemed that it was
Good luck on winning State House seat.
Thank you.
I mean that facetiously.
I understand that. So I have next. I'm sorry, ma'am. I forgot to ask if there were questions, and I see there's a question of the mayor, and there's a question of Mr. Wojcicki.
Well, the presiding officer partially answered the question, but I was going to ask you if you are aware how our assembly meetings get called, how they get, what.
Oh, that's that. Oh, are you aware? Am I an idiot? We in this borough, the citizens of this borough are aunts and uncles and moms and dads and brothers and sisters and cousins. And thank God we talk to each other. And thank God we've got conscience on our side to make sure that we got an idea of what's coming down the pike. And what's coming down the pike is you're going to have to prove your oath of office to me. Next question.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have a question?
I do. Did you read the press release that I put out with the administration's position last week on
Yeah,
this
I
topic?
did, and I thought you were covering your butt.
Oh, okay. So,
I'm sorry, that's my opinion.
so let's, any other questions?
No.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Clark.
And no jail time. Look at that.
And Ms. Olson, I have you up next. Mr. Burley, welcome back. Please give us your name, spell your last name, give us your neighborhood, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Blake Burley, B-U-R-L-E-Y, and just recently bought a house in Slaterville. I'd want to say thank you to the Assembly for the work that you have done here, and those of you that are outgoing, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make clear that I fully support clean wood burning, moral wood burning in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Now, I think all of this stems down to requiring a moral people, that we can't have our form of government without a moral people. And if people in this borough choose to burn wet wood or burn things they shouldn't supposed to, that's us as a community that needs to go to them as neighbors and say, hey, you're not doing this right, and help them and educate them. Our response isn't to have our government to come and oversee all of that and make blanket rules that don't fit in every community in every area, because I can assure you, where I've lived at least the last 15 years in North Pole, in the non-attainment area, there has never, ever been an air quality issue there. And I've burned wood there my whole life. I can't say enough the importance of this assembly listening to the voters, to the vote. Yes, 25% of the population may have turned out. And I don't know what, maybe you can ask me if I know what the typical turnout for voters is, but I think 25% doesn't sound like an atypical voter turnout. So the people did vote. I, for one, absolutely support that we continue this tax cap. Like Ms. Clark said, it works. We can't continue taxing and growing our government and adding more and more services that people don't use, that we don't need. When we've got the money, when we've got the oil revenue, when we've got money coming in from the state, sure, let's build another aquatic center. Let's build another, add another borough service, add another bus line. But when we, the people, don't have that option, when the oil money's drying up, when we don't have all this money coming in, we have to cut back. And we can't keep taxing the people more and punish them for continuing to live here. When and I know in 2017 our borough population decreased by more than 1%, something it hadn't done since 1980, and that's significant. I don't know what is going to happen with this year. I know we've got the F-35s coming in. That's going to change it, but our community has spoken.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burley. Let's see if there are questions for you. Seeing none, we appreciate you coming down. Welcome to town. I have next Tammy Wilson for the next empty seat. Ms. Olson, welcome. Please give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood.
Jeannie Olson, OLSON in North Pole. Just some random thoughts, I guess. First of all, I know that you guys have got a lashing, and part of the reason is because of the lack of transparency. There was this agenda that I saw when I got back into town. I said, my goodness, what is this about? And there apparently was a privileged memo to you guys, and I would think that would be very, very helpful to release that publicly, because I don't know what's in that. And frankly, I have to concur with Carrie, the first commenter, that there's been an increasing amount of mistrust from the citizens to the government, and it's not just the air quality program. And so I don't know how we're going to get that trust back. But I analyzed the election from 2015 to the one this year. Both mayor's races, both had the prop on there. 25%, about same turnout. And I looked at them by individual precinct. And you know, the precincts that made the difference were the ones that are historically progressive. And that should tell you something. And when I have some time, I'll write this down and give you some thoughts about what happened and why it happened. But I'm thinking you're probably wondering, and I think a lot of people were shocked, but I saw it coming. And so how do you get the trust back? One of the things that I think is, yeah, release that privilege memo and let us really see what the attorney told you, because we don't know. And ironically, we're trying to comment on something that we don't even know what we're going to comment about right now. And then and other transparency things like open the elevators back up and open the office to the mayor. If you don't trust us, how are we going to trust you? That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Let me see if there are questions for you. Mr. Lajewski has a question for you.
Okay. So everyone understands, we say this as a question because we have to ask a question. So I'm going to say, are you aware, we got, I think it was 5 memos from the borough attorney, only one of which is confidential. And if you want to borrow 4 of them, you can grab them until 7 o'clock.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Olson? And I'll emphasize questions. Seeing none, thank you. In the empty seat, I have Tara Gildner. Is Tara here? Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Wilson. Please give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Tammy Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N. I represent the Triangle of Death in North Pole. And I really wish that would go away, honestly. I also want to say I agree completely with what Jeannie Olson just said. You know something, what's really interesting about this fight? The 2 of us who've been on opposite ends agree more now than we ever have before. That should say something. I guess my frustration tonight is it should never be based on how many people vote. We only voted about 10.5% on the primary, so does that tell you maybe we're just not getting out? But my biggest frustration, this is a fight with the EPA. They don't give us credit for the voluntary programs that we've done and that we've been successful at. Instead, they continue the fight between ourselves on something that everybody wants. Technology is going to get us there, but even that, as you approved it as an assembly, put so many restrictions on it that all the no-burn days, I'm going to end up with North Pole. I'm not even going to be able to try it in the first place, even though I'm willing to put the $1,000 out myself to see if it works. But but I still can't burn. I'll still be in violation. It's an energy issue. We all know that. We tried through the state to give a lot of incentive, a lot of money, a lot of grants and different things, still sitting here with a lot of empty pipe in North Pole, although we get most of the blame for what's going on. Weather inversions. I'm still a big fan of putting big fans up. Maybe that's what it takes. Find out where the air flows and help it go that direction. Obviously, Delta figured out, because guess what, guys? They burn a lot there. A lot more than we do, but they got a lot of wind. But the biggest frustration, the reason it passed, is you just keep coming almost right into my living room. I have to register my stove, even though it's a certified EPA stove, and you already know I got it because I had to sign something when I bought it. If I want to be able to do it, it's not bad enough. I just have to register my stove. I have to take a picture of my wood. I have to take a picture of my stove. I have to take a class like the last 25 years hasn't been good enough. And anybody here can come take all that information, my private information, and put it all over the web if they want to. I'm tired of litter sniffer cars going out in March and April and May in the summer looking for people who burn wood. Remember, it was supposed to be complaint driven. I'm not exactly sure where the complaining, part ended. But the worst part of all of it is North Pole is getting the worst name for things that they have done an excellent job of doing. There are more woodsheds, there are more people cutting wood up to this year. As I've been going out, and I'm not going to talk about campaigning, but there's less of it because people don't believe you care. And I don't agree. It's a hard thing to be able to do, but everybody was going in the right direction, and you saw the wood put up. I never went by anymore and saw people cutting in October to burn in November. But because it's gone on so long and we're fighting from within and shooting the guns at ourselves instead of outside and saying we should get permission to be able to do these volunteer programs and show that they work, and that should count as much as finding us. And one last thing, Mayor Castle, during your 3 years, and it kills me to say this, but I will, you have done what I think you can with your hands tied by the EPA and no help from the state to help you with this terrible decision. But you could have been finding a lot more people, and you did not do that, and that really needs to go on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Major has a question for you.
So I have a question for you. So I guess, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. And I should have wrote it down earlier because I feel like I had it more eloquently put together. But so maybe even from your perspective, right? So there have been some folks who have said the Fairbanks North Starborough is sort of the bright spot in the Alaska economy with the, F-35s coming in, things like that. What would be your suggested response, or how do you think the state can help us, the collective us, in a response? So with a message that this sends to perhaps the military that may be less inclined to send service members or increase mission in an area where there's a known air quality issue and no way for the local community to really address it under the current EPA rules, knowing that if there's any fight with the EPA, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
So first of all, I think the message, and I actually went to the City of North Pole Council meeting on exactly what you just asked about, because it makes it seem like it's the entire area. We have a monitor right now that is in a bad place. And it's not that it doesn't need to be cleaned up in that area. That's not what I'm saying. But it's been probably the lowest area of North Pole, so it collects a lot in that area. And those numbers are not even close to representing the entire North Pole area from within it. And I'll give you, it used to be at the elementary school, and we had some problems and got it cleaned up, and that monitor was good. I think the message that we do here in the borough of everybody has a section that has its challenges, but overall it's not in the entire borough. It's been a long time since the City of Fairbanks, and I think the City of Fairbanks actually weighed in on trying to split the two areas up, because I don't know when the last time they had a violation when it came to the air quality portion of it. Sadly enough, and it's not just the military, but even the EPA reads the blogs. I found that out a few years ago. I thought they should have better things to do. How we message, how we're doing the voluntary programs, I don't think we ever did that. I mean, most people can cut wood in October and burn it in November. Our wood is so different here. But really getting back to how the programs that we're doing are working, how our numbers have dropped significantly. The program that they just had that the mayor put on about the air quality showed during those times when the borough didn't have the ability to find, we had some of the best numbers as there is. So I think we're concentrating on the wrong thing and concentrating on how bad this one little section is, and then we got little pockets too, but we're the size of New Jersey. Can you imagine if one town got the whole name for everything else? But we need to be putting out publicity of all the good things and how far we have come, and then the electrostatic precipitators and the other things that are going to be coming up, how we may be known for new technology because we address those kind of concerns. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Wilson? Seeing none, thank you for coming down. We appreciate your comments and your service. So I now have an empty seat. If anyone wishes to speak, now would be a good time to come up and fill that seat. Ms. Gildner, welcome. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Tara Gildner, last name Guildner. I was born and raised in Fairbanks.
Neighborhood?
Huh?
Your neighborhood, please?
Yeah, North Pole.
Thank you.
I live in North Pole. I was born and raised in Fairbanks. When I was 18, my dad convinced me to get a stove business because he said, this is a great time to sell stoves. Fuel prices are up and stove sales are high. So I got a stove business. And first thing I learned when I got a stove business was that everybody wanted the EPA certified stoves. Almost nobody was even interested in something that wasn't. People here want to burn clean. And we don't need laws necessarily to ensure that people move to that. As soon as people are able to afford things, many people prefer that option. And I've seen it throughout my lifetime, smoke becoming less, and I've never had a breathing problem personally. Obviously, I don't have any medical problems like that, but I've had friends who've grown up with asthma, and they've burned wood their whole life. And their asthma has actually gone away or lessened over time. This is not, I believe, something that we have a terrible problem with, as terrible as people claim it is. But I also believe that in order to solve a problem, you must be able to stay within the boundaries of current laws. And I've seen several laws broken here, and with no remorse. And I worry that people in their blindness and with their blinders on trying to focus on solving a problem, they don't pay attention or care about the current law system that we have, including people's rights, including federal regulations that I've seen conspiratorial ideas of violating. And I actually have now printed out paperwork on. And I've talked to many people in town, anywhere from business owners to barbershop people to co-workers, and everybody is simply terrified of some of the things you guys consider on trying to pass or propose or have already passed. And I've seen neighbors turn on neighbors and report them for things that they aren't even necessarily doing. But all these laws recently have made everybody so nervous and so scared. And we don't want to have a government we're scared of. We would love to have people here who are here to help us. And we know that in many ways, that is what you guys mean to do overall. But we're scared of the way that it is sometimes implemented.
Thank you, Ms. Gildner. Let's see if there are any questions for you. Mr. Quist has a question for you.
Thank you. You said that there are several laws broken here with no remorse. Which laws? Could you be more? I mean,
Just to name a few. One, ideas of trying to change the price on diesel fuel. That is very illegal according to federal laws. And you've also violated several of our constitutional rights, including passing laws that allow confiscation without paying the community back or paying individuals back for their property. And there's several others, but I won't go into. Those are some of my main concerns.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Gildner? Seeing none, thank you for coming down. We appreciate you coming down. We have another empty seat. If there's someone that wishes to speak, that would be a good time to take it. Welcome back. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and give us your neighborhood.
John Christensen. Last name is pretty long to spell, so neighborhood is North Pole.
Can you go ahead and spell your last name?
What was that?
Please go ahead and spell your
Chrastenen.
Thank you.
So the first point I have is about Proposition 4, the Home Heating Reclamation Act. In a Newsminer article from October 4, it seemed that many missed the point of Prop 4. Prop 4 was and is not just about local versus outside control. The reclamation part was that individuals want to reclaim control for themselves. It would make no sense to take control from the borough only to give it to the same unreasonable control to some non-local entity like the state or federal government. The second point I want to make is that our state has in many ways fought for individuals' freedoms, and some of those fights have been against federal law overreach. One of the examples has been in the recently passed marijuana laws that go against federal laws. I find it somewhat hypocritical that so many people are willing to fight against some federal laws, but not other federal laws that encroach on our freedoms. And right now, the ability to heat with wood or coal or any other reasonable, I have never seen anyone burning tires to heat their homes like I've heard discussions in this room before. Both have federal laws that apply. One's being ignored and the other is not. Both have health ramifications. I can assure you that I don't care for marijuana, but I understand the desires that people have for freedom. There are many risks associated with marijuana use that go beyond the individual who uses it. But please understand my desire to be free, and don't be hypocritical in your support for one federal law and not the other. If we spent as much effort solving the problem as we do punishing and analyzing the problem, the problem would most likely go away. In my own community, I've seen in the last year and a half more gates that are high and not transparent go up so that people can't see down a driveway. The people who have driveways that you can see their house from the road, you don't see a gate there. But the people who have a nice windy driveway where you can't see their house, they put up a gate. There's no fence. The gate is not there to keep their dog in or keep burglars out. The gate is there to keep prying eyes from running around taking pictures, and this has never been the case in the last 15 years. So why is it that we're, like one person says, making our community fight against each other? I hope we don't do that anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. So let's see if there are any questions for Mr. Christensen. Yes, Mr. Quist has a question for you.
Thank you for your testimony. You said that that Proposition 4 is about regaining individual control and not ceding that control to the state or to the federal government. And I guess, can you explain that a little bit better or more?
In the article that was written in the Newsminer, there was a discussion of people weren't aware that it appeared like the person doing the discussing was saying that control was only going to be now shifted from the borough to the state. When we want a reclamation, we want those rights for ourselves. We don't want them to be simply, whether it's the borough doing it, whether the borough's giving fines or the state's giving fines, that's irrelevant. It's that we need to have the choice to heat our houses the way we feel is best and the way we can actually afford.
Okay, well, I understand that. It wasn't so much my question, but maybe I'll try a different one. And
okay.
You were drawing an analogy between the prohibition of drugs federally and the Clean Air Act, I guess.
Yes,
yeah, and
that
so
is it.
so is it your stance then that the Clean Air Act is bad law?
There are some aspects of it that are overreaching. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Christensen? Seeing none, thank you. We appreciate you coming down. I have another empty seat. I'm going to let everybody know that probably at a minimum by 5 to 6 we'll have to recess this so that we can go to our next meeting, but we'll take public testimony up until that point, okay? And then there'll be an opportunity for public testimony after our other meeting. So welcome, please. Give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood.
My name is Joel Baldwin, B-A-L-D-W-I-N. I live over behind Sears. I'm not going to say which side of this I think about, whether pro or con, because that's not what I'm here about tonight. What caught my attention was that there was a ballot initiative put forward. It was approved and put on the ballot. It was voted on. All the rules were followed. The people voted. And then the Borough Assembly said they're going to get around them. That doesn't work. The reason we have ballot initiatives is because the people don't think the Assembly is doing their job. That's why we have ballot initiatives to begin with. The reason people don't vote is because they don't think they have a stake. And even if they feel they do have a stake, they feel they don't have a voice. And so for the people that did go out and vote, to come to a decision, and then to have the very body that wouldn't do what they wanted them to do say, well, we'll find a way around it, is completely unacceptable. And you have lost faith of the people in the borough, because they understand that even if they follow all the rules, the people that they hire to exercise their will have decided they know better, and they're going to do something different. And that's a screaming shame. because then governance by the consent of the governed no longer exists. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Let us see if there are questions for you. Mr. Quist has a question for you.
Thank you. You said that the Assembly was trying to go around these propositions, and are you aware that there's been no such attempt?
I'm aware that the people here think that there is, because we've been told that the borough is getting, the Assembly, or at least the mayor, is getting advice on how to overturn the ballot initiatives, and that's why everybody's sitting here tonight. I mean, I can read, and that's my informed opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming down. We appreciate it. I have another empty seat, probably maybe the last one. Yes. I'm sorry. Mr. Baldwin, apparently the mayor had a question and I didn't see his hand. You want to come back and Mr. Baldwin, if you don't mind, we'll just trade seats briefly. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you said you can read, and I certainly believe you can, and it's a good thing that you do. Did you read my press release that I put out last week on the administration's position?
I read a press release, I believe, that you're referring to, where you said you're looking into how to get this turned over to the state. Is that what you're referring to?
There was mention of transition to the state because the way this is set up, it's federal law where they give the state authority to regulate. The state gives that authority to us, and if we don't exercise it, that goes back to the state. I have no control over that.
Okay.
I can't do anything on that. So what I was transitioning was figuring out what had to go back to the state to do the will of the voters and how we would transition that.
I appreciate what you're saying, and what I took from it is that the Borough Assembly is trying to find a way to overturn the two propositions, and once again, I think that's why everybody's sitting here tonight. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, please come back up. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Please give us your name, spell your last name, give us your neighborhood, and you'll have 3 minutes. And probably this is going to be our last citizen to comment this until we reconvene during the other meeting.
My name is Leah Lindsay. Last name spelling is Lindsey, and I reside in North Pole. Oftentimes, families are not able to attend borough meetings due to schedules, childcare, and other reasons. I feel the borough meetings are set up in such a way as to discourage attendance from some of the most important residents, families with young children, children who are the future of our community. This not only prevents an educational moment for our kids, but it removes the intimacy between the public and the officials we have chosen to represent us. I voted in favor of Proposition 3 and 4 for the simple facts that this Borough Assembly has already proven an inability to improve our air quality while attempting to enforce unfair rules regarding wood burning for heat. The Borough appears to have squandered, misused, and lied about taxes it has already collected, and lied that wood burners were going to be crucified. Crucifixion in the form of fines for warming our homes and keeping our children safe during winter in the most affordable way possible. I hope the borough takes note this evening of all the faces in this room. Faces of the people standing up for each other and not just themselves. I urge this Borough Assembly to respect the constituents, respect the votes of the people in order to move forward and retain what little trust the residents have in the Assembly. The relationship between the borough and its residents is not over. All that has happened is a shift in borough responsibilities regarding residents burning wood for heat and sending a clear message that we cannot afford higher property taxes. But with good intentions and teamwork, the borough and its residents can work towards a better future together.
Thank you. Let's see if there are questions for you, Ms. Lindsay. Seeing none. Mr. Gray has a question for you.
I just want to ask, you said that you feel like the meetings are set up to discourage participation in some ways by families or other people. Could you explain, or maybe do you have an idea of how we could improve that?
I feel like sometimes, like, my kids are in the hallway and, I always get looks and stares and people, I've tried to attend other meetings and I feel like it sometimes is a distraction. I've gotten a couple mean glares from people and I feel like this should be a place for the community for everyone. I don't really have an answer to figure out how to bring the community together, but as a new resident with a young family, I feel that more kids should be brought in to see the democratic process and to see what this is all about.
I'll say on the record that I agree with you. I'll say that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. And I hope we certainly try to be kid-friendly. Thank you for the feedback. Let's see. Let's see where we get here and see if we can squeeze in one more.
Hello.
Give us your name
Eric Foster,
and spell your last name, please.
Foster.
Thank you. And your neighborhood?
Lackloy Hill.
Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
I ramble. Oh well. Look, there's an old Chinese proverb. You probably have heard of it. When you're going through your neighbor's melon patch, don't stop to tie your shoes. Now you guys, got a lot of people here with pent up anger. Okay, let's just say they're all wrong. Okay? The fact that you didn't expect this, or you're like, well, you don't understand it, you should have anticipated the fact that we're a little suspicious. It's been a long road. You know, when this whole thing with the wood stove came, it could have all been handled so much better. Because I got the feeling we were being talked to and not with from the very beginning, okay? So I feel that, Tammy's right, this is a ginormous borough. You know, do you know the state of New Jersey has 9 million people? That's a hell of a lot to draw revenue from, okay? Also, you know, we're very kind of like bipolar in our needs and wants, okay? From east to west, and it seems like it's just being pulled. This is actually a good thing that happened because there probably is some misunderstanding on both parts, okay? And that tension is going to build up, okay? So, I got 1 minute, 2 minutes. Okay, like little stuff, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And now, a lot of us probably connected through the internet, because guess what? The Daily News Miner ain't it anymore. My dad worked for that paper when it was a paper, not a little flyer. You know, we're all, what? They're doing what? Now, you guys, you know, highly educated, realizing, you guys say, okay, they're going to go talk to lawyers. We got to go. And is it for us? Are they really doing this for us? So we get sued, they're going to have our backs? You know, so there's a deep mistrust. Let's heal this mistrust. It's dangerous to have this much mistrust. Oh, God. Oh, God, it's 40 minutes. Okay, for example, a little bit of mistrust. I got this property we just purchased. It's a weird piece of property on Lackloy Hill. I just want to build a little, like, 50 by 50 thing outside the house for my mother-in-law. It's going to cost me $800. And I went up there and I said, why? It's just, well, you know, you have to have a special, what do they call it? Conditional use, $800. They are for hospitals, cemeteries, communication towers, community gardens. I just want to build this little thing. It's going to cost me $800? So, trust, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Let's see if there are any questions for you. I don't see any. Make sure I'm looking everywhere here. I'm thinking if there's one more person that wants to speak, we can come on up. Thank you, Mr. Foster. We appreciate it. Please give us your name, spell your last name.
My name is Bob Sands, S-A-N-D-S.
Thank you. And your neighborhood, please?
Newberry, North Pole.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. From the time this started, years ago I saw a UAF, a gal did a research on wood smoke, and it is not as toxic. It doesn't lodge. The particles are large, and they don't lodge and aren't as big of a health risk as, let's say, diesel fuel, petroleum products, and coal. So those are our 3 biggest pollutants in this town, the biggest toxics. Wood burning is like 10% of the population that burns. We all have these outdated boiler systems that are creating a huge amount of the pollution. But we can't go after that because it's too costly. So we're targeting wood stoves because the borough has to have a plan implemented to appease to the EPA. So what we're doing is we have a system that's not resolving the problem. Our problem is you cannot tell me that we have, what, 4 coal-fired power plants that burn like 8 to 10 train cars of coal a day? There's no way that the amount of wood burned in this borough, it comes close to that. The amount of heating fuel trucks running all day from out here at Petrol Star and everything, there's no way. So this isn't based on fact. This isn't based on science. This is based on a political move that we're using this to go after the simplest thing, because wood smoke is not as toxic as coal, heating oil, and petroleum. And the amount of airplanes that fly over here dump huge amounts of pollution. I can come into town on any given day in the winter and look over Fairbanks and see that black soot cloud from, Aurora Utilities down here. So what we're doing is we're somehow pulling the wool over our eyes. We're not looking at the facts. I mean, I could put you in my garage with a wood stove burning for 20 minutes, half hour, or I'll put you in there with my car running for a half hour. And I'll tell you what, you're not coming out with the car, And so why can't we do this really based on what's really going to work to clean up our air? And go clear across the board. We're just targeting one area. And that's not diplomatic. That is not fair. Of course, if we had natural gas in here, that would eliminate 90% of the problem, because nobody really wants to burn wood. It's a pain in the butt. I'd rather just burn, Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Let's see if there are questions for you. Mr. Lawrence has a question for you.
Mr. Sands, are you aware that scientific analysis of the air in North Pole shows that 80% of the PM 2.5 in North Pole's air is from wood smoke?
Right, that's a particulate. When our air quality was at 1.5, we did not have the problem with wood-burning stoves. In 1.5, when you go lower than that, your biggest problems, your health risks, are from your petroleum products. Those are the most toxic. Those are the ones that lodge deep in your lungs and cannot be coughed out. The 2-point from the wood smoke can be coughed out. They do not lodge deeply into the lungs and cause the greatest health risk. I'm talking what causes the greatest health risk. And we are not looking at that.
So
I can go up and get you the information from the university. A gal did a study on it about 10 years ago.
Thank you. So I'm going to have to, my apologies, but because we have the special meeting and then we have a regular meeting that we have to convene at 6 o'clock, I have to recess this meeting so that we can go have that one. There may be an opportunity for additional comment on this under Citizens Comments B between 6 and 7. It depends upon how the rest of the agenda unfolds, so just so you know. And our plan at this time, unless someone has a different plan, which could be, there's 9 of us, is that we're going to do our regular meeting, which will take us till probably 10, easily. And my apologies, I know that's late because I have to be here too. And I apologize, I turned it down for our friend here. Pardon me?
Call in some pizza.
So that's the basic plan, and we'll do our best to be expeditious in the next meeting so that we can do our best to get done in time to reconvene earlier than 10, but that it would be my estimation. So with that, I'm going to recess this meeting. All right, yeah, until, pardon me? I need to, there's a different motion I have to make. Hold on.
Ms. Dodge, I move to adjourn this meeting to meet after the regular assembly meeting scheduled at 6 p.m. night as
Second is adjourned.
So moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Tacky to move to adjourn, please, this meeting to meet after the regular assembly meeting at 6 p.m. Okay, now, I think we're going to give everybody a minute.
We're still meeting here, Frank. I'm sorry.
Hold on 1 second, Frank.
And do I have the... Thank you. We're going to call our special session back, special meeting back to order. Mr. Cooper.
I am going to move to suspend the rules to complete the special meeting agenda.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Quist to suspend the rules so that we can complete our special meeting this evening. Is there any objection to suspending the rules? Seeing none?
No objection.
No objection. Okay. So with that, we are back in session, and we are still in citizens' comments. And so if there are any citizens still in the audience that wish to speak that haven't already spoken, now is a time to come forward. And I'll ask you to give us your name, spell your last name, tell us your neighborhood, and we apologize for the late hour. Thank you for staying.
My name is Jeff Rensel. Last name is Rentzel, and I live out on Becker Ridge. There's been a lot said tonight, and there's still a lot that needs to be said, and a lot that needs to be done. You were talking about the transparency, the trust issues. We had no clue what this meeting was really about. We had no information. There was some that was leaked out, and we have pictures, copies of it. Some of it coming back from as early as March, even before the election, talking about lawsuits and disallowing or making the ordinances illegal. And it's really difficult. You want to talk about transparency. How can we trust you guys when this occurred back in March 19th to be exact is the date of the memo that I last read. And it talks about that stuff in it. That's way before the election. Somebody was sitting there thinking about changing the ordinance or doing away with the tax cap. It's like, how can we trust you guys? We had this special meeting, and you said it was on initiative 3 and 4. That's it. We had absolutely no clue. You know, you want to be on, or us to be honest with you, you got to be honest with us. It is a two-way street. And you guys have got a lot of work because, like I said, people don't trust you now anymore. And it makes it incredibly difficult to come here when we're not heard. So in order to do that, you guys are going to have to make some serious changes. I mean, like I said, there's evidence. We have evidence. Somebody's got to come clean about it and say, yep, that's what it was, and why this special meeting was even called for. Like I said, we walked into this, what were we on to testify about? All we knew it involved 3 and 4. That was it. So, like I say, the transparency and the being honest, it's critical. You guys dropped the ball big time today.
Thank you. Let's see if there are questions for you. I don't see any questions at this time. Thank you. Oops, wait a minute. Mr. Quist has a question for you.
Thank you for your testimony. So, you referred to memos earlier this year, and if I understand what you're talking about correctly, you're referring to a memo from the Borough Legal Department that addresses some potential legal liabilities regarding the tax revenue cap. And okay, so and if that's correct, what you're talking about, my question then is, are you saying that it's not appropriate for the borough legal department to like proactively examine potential legal liabilities to the borough and taxpayer money?
To further complicated by the certified initiative petition in October, they're talking about doing this stuff way before the election. They're talking about judgments against the initiative contacts and asking the court to declare the ordinance illegal. That's back in March. And then it goes on to say that like I say, it'd be further complicated because the initiative is on the ballot. Why would you even be thinking of that kind of stuff? I mean, this ordinance for the tax cap part has been in place for quite a few years. And now all of a sudden it needs to be challenged. I don't understand why. I don't understand why all of a sudden this year, when the two previous initiatives on the ballot got shot down, that all of a sudden we need to relook at the tax cap. That, like I said, it's been in there for 20 plus years. Why do we need to look at it now? Why all of a sudden is it illegal?
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Runsell? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate you
Thank you.
staying with us and asking questions. Mr. Dowdy, I have another empty seat for anyone that hasn't already spoken in this special assembly. Mr. Dowdy, welcome.
Mr. Dowdy, DOWDY, live on Steel Creek Road. My problem with 2.5 initiative started out under Jim Whitaker. It was pretty obvious when he brought it up that it was cooperation between him and EPA. And my belief was that EPA wrote the beginning of this. And as Luke came in, he pushed it and told us there's money there for it. Well, I was pretty dumb at the time. It went on for a few years before he got it passed. And he assured us that he had money there for us to work with this PM 2.5. He couldn't tell us where it was at. He had some public meetings around the schools and around town, 4 or 5. And I asked him where it came from. Oh, no, I can't tell you. So during his meeting, I asked him again. Natalie Howard, who was to become on the assembly, asked him. Guy Satley, who was on the assembly, asked him. Tammy Wilson, who was represented at that time, asked him at that meeting. He would not tell us. Good. He didn't have to. That was his privilege, I guess. But it was to inform the public of what was going on. When he finally got that ordinance passed, he got up as soon as it was passed and voted on, he got up and gave us the victory speech, saying nobody asked him where the money was coming from. The money was coming from EPA, $3.9 million, I think it was. He said nobody. That included 4 people that I know of. I later went back and listened to that tape that night. Immediately after the vote was taken, there was nothing else on the tape. That meeting did not close with a gavel that night. And I do not believe the clerk's office was responsible for that error. So guess who I blame? It continued from there, and I voted or spoke against Ms. Olson and her group many a times. But in reality, I think her heart and the true meaning of what we was trying to do with PM 2.5, they were the ones that was honest with the people, not the assembly, not the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dowdy. Let me see if there are questions for you. I don't see any. Thank you for staying with us. I have another empty seat. Please, welcome back. Please give us your names.
My name is Nathan Smoot, that is S-M-O-O-T, and as previously, I'm visiting with you this evening from the wonderful community of Chattanooga. And this is the issue that brought me to the meeting tonight. I wish that I had more information to be more prepared, but I don't necessarily need to speak to the specifics, more so perhaps some of the rumors that were in the newspaper and so on and so forth. I was reading this press release, and in the second paragraph it says, communication to the assembly reflect that the community is concerned. This meeting was called to consider overturning the will of the voters. And now I find out that there are those within the mayor's staff that have been trying to determine ways to overturn the voters before the voters even had an opportunity to vote. And that's very unfortunate. You know, as we homeschool and we teach our children about U.S. government, I believe the word that comes to mind is tyranny. And I've already heard the word patriot here tonight. And you know, I think coming to a meeting certainly doesn't qualify us as being patriots. None. You folks being on the assembly and serving our community, that does. I would grant you that. I appreciate your time. But I hope that you won't take that position as an opportunity to enjoy having power that is not within the position that you hold. We have these checks and balances on purpose, the ability for us to put together a proposition so that we can limit government. It's not a slight to you that we do that. You have your job here on the assembly to craft ordinances that you feel like are going to make our community better. And I'm thankful, as I've said before, that it's you right now and not me. But I have a responsibility in the community as well to balance you. And that could be at the ballot box, or it can be knocking on doors with a proposition. But I think it's absolutely shameful that our legal department would be trying to determine and figure out ways to thwart that process. And I'd like to leave it on that note, because that's the real reason why I came here tonight, to give you my time. The reason why I've been sitting back here listening to what seemingly was childish back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. Smoot, and thank you for joining us. Let's see if there are any questions for you. No, but thank you. I appreciate you coming down and staying with us. We have another empty seat. If anyone that hasn't already testified at the special assembly meeting wishes to testify. Mr. Tuck, welcome. Please.
I thought I was going to close it out, but maybe not. Sam Tuck, T-U-C-K, Chena Ridge, Chena Pump area. Apparently, under the rules of Chapter 3.16.040.C.3, I have the right to ask the assembly members a question. Is that correct?
It's technical questions. And I can ask the staff if they have answers.
Well, I'll back up. I'm reverting back to my old police officer days. I'm sorry. Sometimes we have to ask tough questions, and this is one of those nights. I hate to ask it, but I hated to ask it when I was a police officer also, so please don't take it as any kind of disrespect. It's just a question. My question is this. Have any of the assembly members discussed with the administration a possibility for a motion to file some type of legal action against Prop 3 or 4? And of course you can answer it in a question.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Lajewski.
Are you aware I have not had any such discussion with the administration?
No.
What is no?
It looks like the mayor can answer this for all of us.
So your question was, have they chatted with me, since I'm the administration?
Yes.
No, I haven't had a discussion with them. No one that I am aware of has advocated trying to flip either of the propositions here. No one.
And again, I thank you. I feel much better about that. So thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you, Mr. Tuck. Well, let's see if there's any questions for you. I'm forgetting myself. Don't see any. Thank you. So I have an empty seat. If anyone that hasn't already testified in the Special Assembly meeting wishes to come forward, Ms. Rosser, welcome back. Please.
Hi. My name is Mickey Rosser, R-O-S-S-E-R. I live in the downtown area on Denali Way. All I have to say tonight is I don't really get into social media a lot, so I only came tonight because I read in the paper that there was going to be a special meeting regarding 3 and 4. So I go, why are we having a special meeting? We just voted on this. What is this special meeting about? So I came here probably under the wrong assumption. The meeting started at 5:30, so I thought we were going to hear what you wanted to discuss. Maybe we would get comment or not. I come as a citizen, and now it's 11 o'clock at night, and we've got to testify, but we haven't heard anything yet. And I'm just here to say something seems wrong here. That we're called to comment on something that we haven't even heard anything about. And I thought we were coming to hear some discussion about it. And it's now 11 o'clock at night, and I'm up here commenting just to say I don't think something's wrong here with this process tonight. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosser. Let's see if there are. Mr. Lawrence has a question for you.
Ms. Rosser, are you aware that under the rules, we have to hear citizen comment before we can conduct any other business at this meeting?
Yes, I guess sometimes I feel like I think maybe if it had been a separate meeting where it wasn't so long, where people are hanging around here till hours, and I know you put in lots of hours, but sometimes it just feels, especially on things where the transparency is such an issue and the communication is such an issue, that some of this couldn't be done. So we're not sitting here late at night doing it, that we're doing it, that this could have been separate from the regular borough meeting. It's all, I've sat here and now, through Mary Sy, I sat through and listened to the back and forth with the school district and the mayor last year, and it seems like here we are again, and everybody said they were going to try to be more open communication, but I don't know, it just seems like here we are a year later and it's the same thing. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Rosser. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for sticking with us. Seeing no one else coming forward, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And take the liberty of apologizing. I certainly am sorry that this has ended up late and that it's been very frustrating. I agree with you. I tried to get staff report earlier and was not successful, so my apologies. That's very unsatisfactory, I'm sure. But that does take us to other assembly business, which is discussion and direction to the Borough Attorney's Office regarding possible legal challenges to an implementation of Proposition 3, an ordinance establishing maximum allowable tax revenues, and Proposition 4, an ordinance enacting the Home Heating Reclamation Act. Ms. Dolan, have you a staff report? Mr. Lajewski, did you have something you wanted to?
You can wait till after the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll clarify a lot of the questions that I've heard tonight through explaining some of the process and my role and when my office does and doesn't weigh in on legal issues. And so just to clarify, I haven't received a request to challenge either of the propositions, but during the certification process, I do give a legal opinion to the borough clerk, and I did express some concerns from a legal perspective with both of these. And so once it was apparent that the election results were that these had both successfully passed, it was, I believe, my obligation to tell this body, who would be my client in this situation, of those concerns so that you could give me direction if you chose. But I haven't had that direction. This would be the meeting to give me direction, or at a future meeting. So just to start off, an initiative is generally proposed by filing an application with the borough clerk. And at that time, it's just signed by 10 voters that sponsor the petition. And the clerk then has just 2 weeks to certify that petition if it's in proper form and then meets certain substantive requirements about subject matter. So the clerk forwards the petition to me, asks me for an opinion as to whether she should certify. I don't make that decision, the borough clerk does, but I do give her a legal opinion, and then she makes the decision. So some of the legal opinions that I believe people have seen and that this body has received were my opinions to the borough clerk at the time of certification, which for both of these was in 2017. For your information, initiatives need to be liberally construed in favor of validity. So things like technical errors, we give the sponsors opportunities to correct. If they don't have enough of the initial 10 sponsor signatures, we advise them and they can have the opportunity within the required time frame to go get more. And the clerk cannot refuse to certify the initiative unless it violates clearly established law or is otherwise basically patently invalid. So in the pre-election review process, which is what we are in at the time of certification, it's a very liberal standard. Essentially, it's give it to the voters and let them see what they want to do with it. Post-election standard is a bit different. You don't need clearly controlling authority to bring a post-election review challenge. So I think it's probably best for me to walk through kind of the process on both of these propositions so that I can tell you about the legal concerns I identified at the time of certification and why those didn't give rise to for rejecting the petitions at the time. So with respect to the tax revenue cap, which was known as Proposition 3, we did receive an application, and I did write a certification memorandum to the borough clerk, who at the time was not Ms. Tricky. That was in June of 2017. I did note within that opinion that I had legal concerns about it. Those legal concerns weren't new. They had been expressed by borough attorneys long before me. But we had the tax cap on the books, so to speak, since the 80s. We had given it a presumption of validity, essentially, with each election. And so at that time, I didn't have clearly controlling authority. I did raise some questions, and there had also been a recent case in the municipality of Anchorage with respect to a spending limitation that had been brought to my attention and that had also been in the newspaper. In that case, the municipality had unsuccessfully defended a challenge to an initiative. So they had certified a petition to put something on their ballot. Taxpayers brought a challenge in a pre-election review. The municipality defended the initiative, and the court said, no, this actually violates restrictions on making appropriations through the initiative process. So to the extent that a spending limitation is somewhat analogous to the tax cap, or the tax revenue cap as it's known, I did do an analysis at that time. However, Anchorage Superior Court decision's not controlling authority, and it wasn't squarely the same issue. It's a slightly different issue to have a spending limitation than it is to say you can't raise the revenue in the first instance. So the other, I would say, semi-significant case that I noted in that certification opinion is a case that dates back to 1980. It's Whitson versus the municipality of Anchorage. That case additionally I think has been noted by other borough attorneys. I don't think I'm the first one to note that that case had some legal concerns with respect to the tax revenue cap. In that case, the court, and it went up to the Supreme Court, it invalidated a charter amendment which stated that the Assembly couldn't increase taxes without a ratification by referendum to the voters. And the court said that that violated state statutes which specifically require that municipal taxes be levied by general ordinance of the Assembly. So again, it's comparable, but it's not squarely on point. So it wasn't something I could say to the clerk, you can't certify this initiative petition. So after that time, so the clerk did certify, and so they went, gathered signatures. Once they come back with those signatures, the clerk determines whether or not it's sufficient. That's a pretty narrow window. I think she has 10 days, and then the initiative is submitted to the voters at the next general election, unless there's a special election already scheduled. So, so that was the analysis in June of 2017, and then through the budget process last year, it became apparent that for the first time in a lot of years, we were going to be up to the tax revenue cap. So I did have just general questions through the budget process, and I did write a memorandum to the Assembly. Mayor Castle was CC'd on it. It wasn't directed to him. The questions weren't really from him. And so you have been provided a copy of that memorandum too, and I think that was one of the memorandums that was referred to as why were you thinking of this in March and why was the borough attorney writing you in March? It was because we were in the budget process. We knew that we were in a situation where there was limited resources available during that process, and so I was being asked questions. And so that memorandum, one of the questions I was asked is basically, well, you know, what happens? Is this even legal? What do we do if we determine it's not? And so in the course of that, I did note a possibility that a challenge could be brought, and that there was it was complicated by the fact that we had this initiative that we had certified to put on the ballot. I think the largest concern from a legal standpoint with the revenue cap initiative, well, maybe not the largest, I shouldn't really give weight to the concern, but a significant concern is that the voters essentially are able to do something in the tax revenue cap initiative that this body couldn't do itself. And that, by that I mean, this Assembly couldn't pass an ordinance that says you can't raise revenue above this amount moving forward. So you couldn't say, future Assembly, you are not allowed to levy taxes beyond X dollars. And so the voters, in essence, have given themselves a power greater than the governing body, which is slightly contrary to how the initiative process is supposed to work. The initiative process is supposed to be the voters, in essence, stepping into your shoes and acting as exercising the same power as you do. So that was a concern that I had noted as well in March during the budget process. I think the other potential argument there is that it's a de facto referendum on your spending decisions, because if you try to raise a certain amount of revenue for certain spending decisions that you want to make, you can't without going to the voters under what they term voter-approved services under the tax revenue cap. So in a sense, operates as a de facto referendum on those decisions that you're going to make. So those were the potential challenges and concerns that I had. As I've indicated, it was not my intention to challenge the legality of that ordinance absent direction from the Assembly. I will note there was a point where there had not, the mechanism that's been used over the years to keep this on in code has been to repeal and reenact it, so that the 2-year restriction on modifying or negating an initiative ordinance stays in place. There have been years where that wasn't brought and the Assembly did not modify code during that time. So you could certainly not challenge this, leave it on, even if it had been unsuccessful at the ballot. There was nothing requiring you to repeal code. So anyway, so that is the other consideration that has happened since I've written either of those opinions. There was an initiative case decided by the Supreme Court in August of this year. It was a statewide initiative, not a local initiative. However, it dealt with the appropriations power and how that interplays with initiatives. And There's language in that case that essentially strengthens what the court considers as an appropriation. And what the court says is anything that restricts the legislative body's ability to allocate resources violates the restriction on appropriations in the initiative process. So you should be aware of that case as well. So again, sometimes there's areas of law that make things questionable. I do not have controlling authority on those. I still don't have controlling authority. So my advice, if another initiative comes forward in the future that looks identical to this, would likely be the same. It would be to certify, but that there could be a post-election challenge to that. The other possibility that I think you should all be aware of is what happened in Anchorage was it wasn't litigation that was between sponsors and the municipality. It was a third-party citizen suit that was brought against the municipality to challenge the initiative. That could still happen here. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that we could be in a situation where we're defending this. It doesn't mean that we're on the, when I'm saying I have legal concerns or things for us to discuss, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are in a position to bring the challenge. It could be brought against us as well. And so for that reason, I did recommend that we notice a possible executive session if we're going to dive further into some of these legal issues, because I don't want to put us in a position where it would be very difficult to make strategy decisions or defend a challenge if I've essentially given an assessment of how likely some of those arguments are to succeed or fail. So in other words, I could be sitting here giving you a roadmap for someone to go file a complaint against the borough to challenge this initiative, which would undermine the voters and potentially be contrary to what action you would like to take if there was something filed. So I just want to be careful of how far I go. I try really hard to give you all my legal concerns and do my memorandums open and just as general legal advice and not attorney-client privilege, but that should be something that you're aware of if you want to have deeper discussions on that. So, so with that, unless you have questions specific to the tax revenue cap, I can move on to Proposition 4, which was the Home Heating Reclamation Act.
See the mayor's, I see some hands, so we'll start, the mayor's was the first one I saw, and then I'll have Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Quist, I see.
Well, I just wanted to clarify a little bit of process because there were some comments made earlier that weren't totally accurate. First off, the attorney is not the mayor's attorney, and we all know this. I don't think the public does. And Ms. Dolan has reminded me on more than one occasion that should I be doing something that is questionable, her response is to let you folks know that because she works for you and the borough in general and has multiple responsibilities. And certainly I cannot dictate her and what direction she goes on these things. And I've got to say, I've worked with her for a number of years, and she's very good about giving legal opinions. And she's been accused of advocating a position here, and that's absolutely not the case. If you're listening to her talk, she's trying to explain the legal sideboards on what's been going on here. And I don't think the public realizes from the comments that I've been receiving, we're kind of in the middle on this, and Ms. Dolan's alluded to it a little bit here. We are going to do something, and there are citizens out there on both sides of this that could challenge us legally for what we're doing, whatever we do. And this isn't just a supposition. She's identified in Anchorage this happened, where the citizens sued the city because they were instituting a similar, not tax cap, but the revenue situation, the spending limits. So that has happened, and there is risks associated with that have impacts on our taxpayers that you folks need to be informed about. The same on the air quality issue. I mean, the EPA was just notified they're being sued for not doing enough on our problem. And so we have to be cognizant of all of these different legal possibilities that can be a significant financial interest for our taxpayers. They don't want to see us losing money here. And so that's kind of why I think the discussion's totally appropriate, and I don't want to be misinterpreted as a saying that I'm not saying an opinion here. I think I've made it clear that my opinion is the will of voters is what we go with, and if we get sued over doing that, I think that's a good expenditure of funds, just to defend that we were trying to do the will of the voters. But that's your decision, not mine, to make, and I think Ms. Dolan and her predecessor have given you good legal advice, opinions on the different cases here. This isn't new, and this isn't the first time we've had these legal opinions from our municipal attorney. Thanks.
Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Quist.
Ms. Dolan, just to confirm, you know of no individuals or groups who have indicated that they're going to try to bring suit regarding either one of these propositions?
We can talk a little bit more about, no, not directly now. I did, Proposition 4, at the time of certification, I'll walk you through that history, and I did have contact with an attorney that represented a group.
All right, but nothing on the tax cap?
No.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Quist.
Thank you. Ms. Dolan, could you speak again or a little bit more about the August ruling about state appropriations and how, so appropriations, rather limits on spending or revenue are construed as appropriation? Or?
Sure. Can I bring it with me? Hang on 1 second. So it's actually, it's the Stand for Salmon Initiative case, and so they were really dealing with resource allocation in the context of public resources of the state. But the court walked back on some of its earlier law in a different case about what it means to have an appropriation when you're dealing with a public asset. And essentially, what the court says is that it's only the legislature, in our case it would be the Assembly as the legislative body, that retains control over the allocation of those assets amongst competing needs. So, generally, when you look at an appropriations decision or appropriations analysis, you first have to say, am I dealing with a public asset? And then the second question is, does that allocate it either to a specific user group or a specific purpose? So the easy ones are like giveaways with land, for instance. So if somebody brought an initiative saying, I want to transfer the Carlson Center to the university, and they put that in initiative ordinance, that would be an appropriation. It's clearly a borough asset, and it's clearly seeking to give it away to a specific user group. So in resources, public resources like land and water and salmon, the court has at one point not thought that regulations could be considered a form of an appropriation, and the court really walks back on that language in the Stand for Salmon case. But I think the important language that's in the case that to look at in the context of the tax cap is that if you're essentially taking the discretion away for a body to allocate the resources it has for a specific purpose, then you have completely taken from the legislative body the ability to make those decisions. So I don't know if I'm trying not to talk too much like a lawyer, and I realize I am because I'm talking about a Supreme Court case, but it's really it's the discretion over allocation decisions, I guess, is the best way I can say it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like we're ready for you to resume where you...
Okay, so you want to talk about Proposition 4 then? Okay. So Proposition 4, we had a little bit of, I'll call it unique process on this one because it did come back a couple times. So I ended up writing 3 different certification opinions. So the first initiative application that the clerk received had an ordinance attached that that I had some questions on. I wasn't clear whether it was intended to extend to the gas utility, and I wasn't clear that it had where it was supposed to be in code, what was really supposed to be accomplished. And so I initially wrote the borough clerk an opinion, and we, and Ms. Ashford Bingham at the time wanted to bring the sponsor in so that we could explain how he could correct those technical deficiencies or legal deficiencies in it. And so I attended a meeting briefly just to ask questions and say, were you intending to exclude the gas utility or include it? Because it was important for a single subject analysis. Initiatives can only cover a single subject. So I did do an initial opinion based on what his intent was, because he said he was going to submit a revised application. So just in the interest of time, I wrote an opinion. I did question the ordinance, even with the modifications he indicated he was going to make. So what happened was he did make those changes, he resubmitted it, but they didn't have the correct number of sponsors when it was resubmitted. So I had to draft another opinion essentially recommending rejection because the corrections weren't made. So because of the time the clock was ticking, I had to write an opinion on the initial application petition. Anyway. So ultimately it was so in that time frame after that rejection, I was contacted first by email by a representative from Citizens for Clean Air wanting to meet with Ms. Ashford Bingham and I, and we had to explain the process to her that we don't meet with citizens seeking to challenge these things or talk to them. We explained our roles in the process, and that group had an attorney that was representing them, and I spoke with him at the time, and I just explained the process for certification at the time and what the standard is for pre-election review, essentially. And so while I know he was mulling over, I'll say, challenges, and he did indicate to me a couple bases that he thought for challenges, I didn't hear anything further. We did get a petition that was resubmitted after the clerk's rejection, and I did write then another opinion recommending that the clerk certify, but identifying legal concerns. So just to give you an idea on the legal concerns, so the Home Heating Reclamation Act has been presented in similar forms and initiatives in the past. And I was not borough attorney at the time, although there were questions raised about those initiatives. But again, applying the same standard, there was no controlling authority that said there's no room to determine this is unenforceable as a matter of law. You have to have clearly controlling authority. So we recommended not doing a pre-election challenge or denying certification and submitting it to the voters. So a couple of the challenges that are noted in my certification opinion to the clerk are that we have our local air quality powers both in Title 46 of the Alaska statutes and then in Title 29 of the Alaska statutes. So what Title 46 says is that with the approval of the department, meaning DEC, the borough can establish and administer a local air quality control program, and that we operate in lieu of and consistent with DEC's program. So in Title 29 essentially repeats that language, but it qualifies it that we can establish that program only if the municipality has obtained the consent of its governing body through an ordinance authorizing the participation. So I emphasized governing body there because that's you're the assembly, you're the governing body for the borough. When the phrase governing body is expressly used, at least in municipal law treatises, it's treated differently than a power that's just granted to the municipality generally. So it's a specific body that grant of authority is to, which means the voters may not be able to exercise the initiative power with respect to that. And we have two Alaska Supreme Court cases that that hint, I will say, at that, but it's not directly the same application of law as what you would find in treatises or in other jurisdictions, such as California, that have specific law on point to this subject. So the two cases that we have, one is the Whitson case that I mentioned earlier in the context of the tax cap. Again, in that case, the court said that the state statute requiring that the levy of the tax rate be done by the Assembly through ordinance. And the other case is Griswold v. City of Homer, but that case was a zoning case. And what the court said in that case is, well, you can't zone by initiative because the Planning Commission is a required step in the zoning process. So because Title 29 says you have to go to the Planning Commission before this body hears a rezone ordinance, you can't zone by initiative because you'd skip the Planning Commission step. So again, not directly on point, but it hints at this concept that when we give authority, when the legislature gave authority to a certain body in Title 29, that they actually meant this body and that it wouldn't be subject to initiative or referendum. And there is some support that in order to have an effective air quality program between DEC and the borough, that you would need to know consistently who's going to operate that program because of staffing, because of resources. You know, you acquire assets and things in order to operate a program, and so if it can change hands every 2 years, transitioning doesn't lead to an effective program. So there's possible legislative reason that governing body was specified instead of the municipality. However, I have no legislative history on that. I have pulled the legislative history on that section of Title 29. I did not see anything there to say that was what was happening. And as I mentioned, the other two Alaska Supreme Court cases that are relatively on point don't directly support that argument. So I did not view that as a basis to say that this initiative's legality was clearly illegal. The other question, well, I guess maybe there was more than one, but the other question that I had addressed within that certification opinion was whether the proposed initiative ordinance conflicted with borough code such that it should have been brought as a referendum. And the referendum power is typically more restrictive on matters of health and safety. So it would be important to know if we were analyzing this as an initiative or a referendum. But this initiative does more than just repeal existing law. It actually has its own law that it's enacting. It has definitions in it. It actually had a body of an ordinance in it. And so, again, looking at municipal law treatises, essentially they say an initiative can suspend or prohibit operation of other laws at the same time as enact new laws and be appropriate to be in the initiative process. So again, we have the obligation to liberally construe the power of the initiative unless it's patently invalid, so I recommended that that petition be certified. In looking at the Stand for Salmon case, I did raise additional concerns as to whether or not air is a public resource of the state such that it's subject to the appropriation power. And so your ability to regulate the air couldn't be infringed on through the initiative process. However, the underlying resource at issue is a state resource, not a borough resource. And so unless you could conclude that we stepped into the shoes of the legislature because they delegated us that authority by saying we could operate the local air quality program, you couldn't clearly say this is an asset that's being appropriated from one user group to another through this initiative process. So I merely footnoted it and didn't give it a full legal analysis in the certification opinion. So that said, I think there's, again, possible legal issues. I didn't have clearly controlling authority. There are other groups that could bring litigation and that have recently. It was in the newspaper yesterday, and I forwarded to you the notice of intent to file suit against the EPA that a group that represents Citizens for Clean Air, which is the same group that had contacted me during the certification process, filed suit. So it's possible. Like I said, I haven't been contacted by anyone to say they're going to file suit on this initiative, but it's a possibility. I don't think we could have ruled DEC out as a possibility at one point, if perhaps, but I don't think so. I've spoken to their AG. He's indicated the state is not going to weigh in on the initiative. He didn't say what that meant, but he said they weren't going to weigh in on it. So again, I don't have that indication, but it is something to be aware of in case it happens. So there are other kind of policy and legislative decisions that you'll need to make upon certification of the election with the initiative. And so I don't know if you want me to stop there or if you want me to talk about what some of those things are for consideration and implementation. And I won't promise to have every answer for you on the implementation because some of those decisions will need to be brought forward to you by the administration. Some of them are going to be decisions you make as a legislative body. So I can flag the issues for you. I just might not be able to tell you clearly what you're going to do or what the administration is going to do.
It seems like maybe it's a good time for us to pause and see if there are questions based on what you just did, but I think absolutely that's part of what we wanted to hear.
Okay.
There are questions based on... roll.
Good. Okay, I thought you were pointing at the mayor. Sorry. Okay, so I think we kind of already covered the tax cap. You don't have to take any action. It just becomes law upon certification of the election, and where that is generally relevant is in your budget process. So there isn't really any immediate. There's nothing immediate you're going to notice or any immediate decision you'll need to make regarding that. With respect to the air quality initiative. It's very clear in that initiative ordinance that we can no longer have an enforcement program in this borough. So right now we do have a memorandum of understanding with the with DEC, and we have a whole code that essentially is an enforcement program and has certain duties that we are required to do. So something that you'll really need to think about is how this air quality program should continue in the borough. It's over the years we've had different initiatives, and the borough has maintained a voluntary program during that time where it could do things such as continue education efforts and continue grant programs that people come in and voluntarily remove or exchange out a stove. It will be up to you or to administration what this all looks like, whether you maintain your current staffing and say we're going to run an education program with this current staffing along with a wood stove changeout program, or whether you're going to say we're going to transition this entire program over to DEC. There are some things within that. We have some positions that are grant funded. We have some that are general fund. So there's employees that some decisions need to be made, I guess, essentially. Are they going to be laid off? Are they going to be reassigned duties? If they're obviously not working under their grants, they're going to be limited in what duties they could be reassigned. The general fund positions you have more flexibility over. We have sniffer vehicles. We do the hotspot guidance. So there's community monitoring that is done. You had just appropriated $400 and something thousand to do the retrofit control device, ESP testing. So some decisions are going to be made about whether that continues. As I mentioned, we have the MOU with DEC. There is a 90-day termination provision in that. It could either be terminated or it could be amended. I don't see that we formally amended it after the 2010 initiative, so this memorandum has been in place, I think, since 2009. It was modified in 2016, but there are things that we cannot do in our memorandum of understanding with DEC with the initiative language. With respect to area sources, right now we take lead in developing and implementing all those local control programs. I don't think it's realistic for us to be a lead under this language. We can't do complaint response and enforcement, which is our obligation under this agreement. The ambient air monitoring and forecasting requirements are in there. I think that's a possibility depending on how that's being used. We're currently lead for the air quality planning and for developing a PM 2.5 attainment plan. We do agree to hire employees and maintain staff in this agreement. So there'll have to be some decisions. I think to the extent that some of these provisions conflict now or will conflict once the initiative ordinance is effective on certification, I think they're void as a matter of law. The others, we'd have to make a decision whether we're going to ask for an amendment or we're going to just give a 90-day notice of termination and transfer the whole program over to DEC. With respect to grants, we have grants that require deed restrictions, and so it's our post-2016 targeted airshed grants. They started putting the deed restrictions in. It's actually in code as well. So to the extent that it's a voluntary program to come to the borough and say, I would like to remove my device in exchange for X number of dollars, and I will agree to sign this deed restriction, I think that can continue. I think it's still a question as to whether or not those deed restrictions can be enforced under the terms of the initiative ordinance. So then, speaking of the ordinance, so you technically don't have to take any action. This initiative ordinance becomes law without any action by you, but in reality, you have to take some action because it's going to conflict with code on the books, and that would just be confusing, I think, to the public. So a conforming ordinance of some sort will need to be presented, whether it's just to go through and say, we're going to take out the provisions that conflict and we'll enact the new ordinance as a new code section so that it's on the books, so to speak, or whether you're going to say, we're not going to have an air quality program anymore, so we're just going to repeal all of Chapter 2128. So that will be another decision that, whether it's the administration that brings an ordinance and a package forward for your consideration, or whether it's something that the body, I just draft and send to you, and then one of you can decide to sponsor. Either way, it's something that should really happen. So, so those are probably the biggest decisions and concerns with implementation that you should be aware of.
So, Mayor, is this a good time for you to give us a
I'm sorry.
I'm looking at, I'm wondering if this is a good time for the mayor to at least give us a high-level briefing of his timeline and plan, or if that's allowed under our notice.
I think it has discussion on implementation in the notice, so I think
it seems timely. If
I don't know that
just an overview, you have plans
prepared, but
yeah.
Well, I didn't prepare anything per se. I'm meeting with Mayor Ward, and this is really something I think he gets to carry forward. We're trying to nail some of this down between the legal department and myself also, so that we can have some more definitive answers. Some of it requires discussion with DEC and EPA, where they put strings on grant monies, and can we get them to loosen up the strings? The enforcement pieces, like the deed restrictions, they require us essentially to enforce those. I mean, we've got to do that. Are they going to be okay saying, all right, well, you don't have to enforce those? That's a question we don't have an answer for just yet. We'd like to do as much as we can to be helpful for the community. So we want to do as much of the stove changeout program as we can. Mayor Ward agrees philosophically with that, but we still don't know exactly what that looks like until we get some more answers. But we are having meetings next week with DEC and EPA to see what kind of latitude we can get from them and see where we go. So I'm trying to not wade too deeply in it. I think since Mayor Ward's going to be the guy to live with all of that and the consequences thereof, you know, I'll defer to him. So I'm more just in homework collection mode at the moment. And then we'll have meetings and see where it goes. I mean, the election won't get certified till October 25th, so we're status quo to then, other than we've had to pause some of the programs that in the gray area, not knowing, the stove portions of the stove change-out program and such. We don't want somebody to start investing money on an application and doing something that down the road we're going to have to say, I'm sorry, we can't follow through on that, and then they're out some money and effort. So we've paused that program for now. I did talk with Mayor Ward about that, and we'll roll it as fast as we can as soon as we know what direction it can go.
Okay, thank you. Is it a good time for questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Any questions of Jill or the mayor? Yeah, Mr. Lejeski.
This is for Jill, the attorney. It's almost like I'm going to debate with you a little bit, or with an idea, but you proposed that one of the weaknesses to the tax revenue cap was that its limitation of tax revenue could be seen as an overall limitation of how much revenue can be raised, and that could be seen similar as the spending limitation that was imposed in Anchorage and thus overturned. When you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, no, it doesn't limit revenue one bit whatsoever. All it limits merely is tax revenue. There's no limit on fundraising, voluntary sources of revenue, or any other source. It is merely tax revenue. So I don't know, I was just thinking, it doesn't sound valid to me, but I don't know if... Don't respond if it would weaken our argument in court. If we're
as I
defending it,
said,
but-
I think there's strength and weaknesses to all of these arguments, and to the extent you want me to weigh the strengths and weaknesses and tell you what those are, I would really recommend you do it in executive session. As much as I know you want to have a full public process again, we don't know which side of the coin we could end up on. We could end up defending this initiative ordinance, and so if I've said...
Okay, then I don't want any more of your opinion.
Yeah, so I just want to be cautious that... Yeah. There are certainly not, they aren't perfect arguments, or we wouldn't have certified the petitions.
Other questions of stolen? You appear to have thorough, or as thorough as we can be. I guess maybe some of us thought we might. Yes, Mr. Matt. Mr. Cooper.
Yes, ma'am. I can be Mr. Matt, whatever you want.
It's a long day.
As long as I'm not Mr. Ed, not yet. I was thinking about the deed restrictions. Will the initiative affect deed restrictions, or the enforceability of deed restrictions are already in place? Or
I don't think so. It's not retroactive. It can't be. It's prospective, and they were valid when they were placed on. They were placed on property under code that we were authorized to have in place, and they were actually conditions of some of the grant monies. So I don't think it's going to affect anything looking back.
I guess my recollection is that the deed restrictions, as they have existed, were part of a voluntary program. I think you touched on that, right? If somebody came in and said, I want to do this, I'll agree to these terms. And
Right. So I think I'd compare it to more to an agreement than a regulation. It's similar to how federal highway monies are conditioned on states having the legal limit for DUI at .08. It's voluntary, right? You don't have to put your legal limit there, but you don't get money if you don't. And so same with the deed restrictions. It's our wood stove change-out program and the removal program are voluntary programs. People come in, they sign up for them, and as a condition of being given money, they agree to certain terms. And I distinguish that from a regulation that the Fairbanks North Star Borough puts on an installation or an operation of a stove.
thanks. That was the distinction, I guess, I was looking at.
Mr. Lejeski.
So is now a time when I can continue my comments from that I was attempting to make at the end of citizens' comment or assembly member comments last meeting?
But we're in discussion and debate, so sure.
Okay, so I've got, let's see, where am I going to start? Well, so I actually feel like I need to address one of Mr. Gray's comments, and you made the comment that you thought there's a lot of disinformation. So I will first agree to a certain extent. There was disinformation in the sense of who called the meeting, who the borough attorney works for.
It's just misinformation.
A few kind of procedural things like that, and I don't know necessarily that you intended this way. If it is, I disagree. If not, then I don't. But if it was intended, specifically to Lance Roberts, I don't know if you saw some of his political activism, and I think a lot of people saw that, and it ended up circulating. I would have to disagree. When we look through the memos, which unfortunately they're public documents, but they really should have been, and I apologize for this, because I think I could have done something about it, but they should have been attached on the website. You guys should have been able to read all the publicly available memos as soon as the meeting was noticed, and I could have, scanned them and put them out there independently or whatever. Anyways, if you look through them, it clearly states, and the public ones, this is with respect to the tax cap, that, well, some of it's reiterating what the attorney's already said, there are legal concerns about it. And then it goes on to say that it would not be appropriate to talk about those concerns before the election, presumably because it'd be electioneering. So, and it also says if there's desire to challenge it, act after the election. And, I can't read everyone's minds, but my prediction would be probably at least 6 of the people on the assembly voted against the tax cap. So you start combining all those facts and you see a publicly noticed meeting with documents withheld right after the election. It looks really bad. I understand that fully, so I think it was completely irrational for so many folks to be so concerned. But I will say this. I think it was, an unfortunate coincidence of aligning of events. I don't think that there's actually intent to overturn specifically the tax cap. And we heard it briefly from the person who scheduled the meeting, the presiding officer, that you didn't intend it that way. And I've never seen you on this assembly or anywhere else in life do anything dishonest. I'll say that. So I just want that to be out there. I agree with everyone. This looked horrible, and I think I'll rest my thoughts there.
Mr. Gray.
I just want to address your response back to me. I was not addressing my concerns towards any one person. I saw a lot of, or several different, to my mind, cases of misinformation, and I wasn't directing that towards any one person. So I just was trying to clarify.
Well, I certainly, Mr. Cooper.
No, go ahead. I'll wait till you're done.
I just apologize to the public and to anyone else. Certainly, I was trying to do my best, and that really didn't do well. So I apologize for the angst, for the upset, for the disruption of trust, for being here at 12:30 at night. I'll always endeavor to learn and do better. I only have one more meeting to do better at, but unless somebody schedules a special meeting for 2 assembly members can do that. So to the public, both here and those that have given up and gone home, and those listening, please accept my apology. I certainly did not. I'm very sorry that this was so disruptive to so many. It was certainly not my intent. Mr. Cooper.
Sure. I'll echo your comments, Ms. Dodge. I think, and to borrow a line from Mr. Lejeski, I think the stars aligned in an unfortunate way that it created this maelstrom. To answer Mr. Tuck's question directly, no. Just going back to that. I believe the mayor took care of that. But I also want to say, I think that Ms. Dolan is doing her job, and I've said that in my response to many people who emailed me. I think the borough attorney has an obligation to give what her thoughts are so that we're all informed. I think it's important that we're doing it in public session so that you can hear what she has to say. That's part of it. And so I know that it was a long road to get to where we are to have this relatively short discussion about these issues. But I think that Ms. Dolan was doing her best, Ms. Dodge was doing her best, all of us are doing our best, and this is the way it panned out. And I did just want to mention, going back to the March memo, because Mr. Rensel brought it up, I remember that time frame very clearly, and there was a lot of discussion in public about the tax cap. There were a lot of questions about the tax revenue cap and how it worked, and I even believe Ms. Brady, our CFO, was here answering questions at a work session, if I'm remembering correctly, so that folks who were new to that understood how it works. So, I understand that it looks like this was something that was, people were thinking about how to challenge the tax revenue cap back in March, but really it came out of a different place, and that was from a budget discussion. And certainly there were questions in there about the legality of the tax revenue cap that Ms. Dolan addressed in that memo. But it really came from a completely different place in time, and that was the budget cycle at the time and people who didn't know. And so that March memo was part of educating all of the Assembly on how the things worked and why. So thank you for everybody who stayed here all the way through the end tonight. Appreciate it. I think that, Mr. Smoot and Mr. Lejeski used the term patriots, and Mr. Smoot suggested that maybe people who are down here testifying aren't patriots, but I think that everybody who participates in the process, I mean, it's really important to participate, and it's important that you guys are here telling us what you think by email, in person, everything else. So I guess to Mr. Lejeski's point, I don't want to downplay the importance of the public coming down here and telling us what they think. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any last? Yes, Mr. Quist.
Thank you. Just generally, I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the Assembly, but I'd be surprised if this wasn't a popular sentiment. I mean, I don't think that this should be a political process here. This is government. The politics happens at the ballot, and people have weighed in. They've told us what they think, and I'm not personally of the opinion that we should have some kind of activist legislative body in this regard that works to overturn the will of the voters. So I'm on the record in multiple ways as being against propositions 3 and 4, but that's my personal opinion, and I mean, I can advocate for that, and I've got one vote at the ballot. But then here we're faced with implementing that law in the best way possible, and if we didn't listen to the advice of our borough attorney, I think that we would be doing the borough and the taxpayers a significant disservice. So, I have much more to say, but I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Mr. Lejeski.
I just wanted to say my position on these propositions and any future ballot initiatives is that the borough, in my opinion, has an obligation to legally defend any citizen-passed initiative. And that's, anyway, that's my position.
Any last? Mr. Lawrence.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Lawrence and second by Mr. Tecchi. Is there any objection to adjourning? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us.
It's not 2:30 yet.
We're adjourned.